Hey there, welcome to saas.unbound, brought to you by Saas Group. I'm your host, Dana, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business a success. And today with me is Justin Duke, the founder of Buttondown, a small, elegant tool for producing newsletters. It's been around for 6 years, bootstrapping, advocating for simplicity and openness, and built completely in public, which is fascinating. Great to see you here, Justin.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
Cool. All right. Well, there are tools that you kind of take time to get used to or fall in love with, and then there are tools that it's love at first sight. And this is something that happened with me when I saw Button Down. To be honest, it's just yeah, simple and elegant. So let's get to maybe first your background because I know that you just started doing it full time about 2 years ago. So what's been before?
Of course. So before I was working full time on Buttondown, it really was more of a nights and weekends project for me, kind of the stereotypical indie hacker pulling up to a coffee shop right after work and like camping out till 8 p.m. or until they kick me out. I was working at Stripe first as an IC, an individual contributor, working on some of our data analytics tools and making it easier for merchants to kind of close their books and understand their businesses, then shifting after a couple of years to more of a management and strategy role. And then before that, I was at Amazon where I was working on the Kindle ecosystem, sort of ebooks and e-readers and all of that. And it was really, really fun kind of getting to have my feet in two worlds at once of like, on one side, I was in big tech, kind of learning how to deal with really, really large organizations and massive data sets and building like these ironclad architectures, but a very, very small part of them. And then on the other side, you're kind of doing the opposite, right? You're like figuring out how to get product market fit. You're fighting not just fires, but like 17 different fires at once and trying to triage which fire is the most important. And iterating and launching and designing super, super rapidly. Bouncing between those two roles was really, really fun and a great way to learn a lot.
Okay, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. Like, is does work for a huge company then help narrow down your vision for your own SaaS product?
It does and it doesn't, which is kind of like a cop out answer, but I'll qualify it a little bit.
It
One way
depends.
where yeah, it depends.
Yeah.
What one way where it really really helped was getting an understanding of how the best companies in the world run really really complex and interesting and difficult tech products that have thousands of edge cases and millions of customers and all of these things. I felt like I leveled up so much as an engineer due to the time I spent at Amazon and Stripe. The flip side of that, though, is you kind of have to unlearn a lot of those lessons because so many of the quote unquote best practices of like how you should make product level decisions or how you should test a new feature before it goes live and doing the rollout and all of those things, those are great when a quote unquote like feature or a decision is this behemoth large thing that has hundreds of people contributing to it, and as soon as you push it to prod it's going to be touched by tens of thousands of customers, and you need to like be as super detail oriented and cover all your bases and like really erring on the side of caution. But one of the like classic sort of indie hacker truisms, right, is like if you're writing unit tests, you're probably not shipping fast enough. And I don't go quite to that end of the extreme, but I did have to unlearn some of the lessons of, okay, if I have an intuition that this is the right way to build something, I'm going to validate that not by like trying to build a lot of consensus with other stakeholders and writing pages upon pages of integration tests and PR FAQs, but I'm going to get it in front of customers and users as quickly as possible, see what they think, see what they see, and then iterate from there. You learn a lot very quickly in the indie hacker landscape of like how much you can build and build and build that is all kind of throwaway work if you don't have that initial customer validation. And that was one of the big lessons I kind of had to relearn for myself.
Okay. All right. So, how did Button Down come to life at all? Like, when did the idea come to you, and why did you decide to work on a newsletter building tool?
Of course. Years and years ago, I was using a tool that is still around today. It's called TinyLetter. I think they're owned by MailChimp now. And I just had like a personal newsletter, couple hundred subscribers. This was before sort of the big newsletter boom. And I was just like, I want to share what books I've been reading, what articles I thought were interesting, that sort of thing. And I was using TinyLetter to send that out. And it was just bluntly like a very frustrating experience of the interface would randomly eat my emails, and I felt like I was fighting against the tool to do what seemed like would be a really simple task, which was just like I'm writing some prose, I'm copying and pasting, I'm sending it out, like I'm keeping my friends and family up to date with what I'm doing. And I had one weekend, I think it was like Labor Day weekend or one of the 3 to 4 day weekends, one of the worst thoughts an engineer can ever have to themselves, which is, I bet I can build a better version of this tool to use for myself. And that was before I really had done any diving into like SMTP and all of the things you really have to do to build a robust and a secure and a scalable emailing system. But I was really focused on the user experience of like, if I can just get this in a flow that like I feel like I will enjoy using it, then the project's a success. And of course, it took longer than just that one weekend to kind of get the initial MVP off the ground. But as I was sort of sharing screenshots on Twitter and other places with here's this like hackneyed, harebrained idea that I have for myself that I'm going to build, I realized that all of my friends and all of my colleagues who are using a bunch of competitors in the space all kind of felt that same thing of like, I would 100% use this, I would 100% pay for this. And then the project started to graduate to me from a maybe this is a thing I like duct tape together for myself and maybe open source down the line to, oh, there's a there. I should think about how this becomes less of a one off tool, a fun little project, and more of a product, a thing that I can build a business around and actually like spend not just weeks or months, but years and years developing and making into a really, really strong solution.
Okay, that makes sense. And um, at least now, right? There is this trend or like a thought, especially on Twitter, that's going on that for a developer, it's just so easy to come up with an MVP because especially now, like there are like so many no code, low code, whatever white paper solutions. So you just press something together, and it works. But then the actual difficult part is selling it. And like you said, you use Twitter and building in public to validate the idea. Um, did it bring you the initial customers after all? And or maybe you had to iterate when it was obviously later available to the public.
Definitely the latter. I think when I talk with a lot of engineers and first time founders starting their business, they have this misconception that like you spend some time building an MVP, doing maybe low code, no code, like validating with a handful of folks, saying, okay, this thesis seems correct. Like let's work towards a launch. We're gonna have this lovely thing where we go viral on Twitter and we hit top one or two things on Product Hunt and we get viral on Hacker News and like boom, then the product is solved. We have all of the customers we ever need. And I'm sure there are a couple businesses for whom launching looks like that of okay, you're grinding for a bit, you have this really nice release schedule, and then you're done, and then the flywheel just kind of takes over from there. I think that's the edge case though, not the reality. Like uh, when I look back on Buttondown's launch, it went well by my standards of I think it was like the top 2 or 3 on Product Hunt. Like I got good traction on a bunch of channels. Like you get a lot of eyeballs, but very few of those folks actually convert. You get to go from a handful of your friends and your beta testers using a thing to slightly larger than that. But it wasn't and now I can sit back and just like watch the stripe graph go astronomical. My work here is done. And that was really the first of many, many steps of, okay, the launch went well. We have some folks. What's the new information that I can use? What's the copy that helped versus what's the copy that like kind of rubbed people the wrong way? What are the features that people were expecting to be there that aren't, and vice versa? And really, the launch is sort of like not a point in time. It's a process that kind of never ends. I feel like even now, like the vast majority of Buttondown's target audience has never heard of Buttondown before, and so there's no sense that like, hey, I can stop thinking about that initial moment of traction because the reward for having a good launch is like, all right, this is just enough ammunition to keep on turning the organic growth flywheel and figuring out what's next and what's next and what's next.
Right. Okay. Do you remember how many customers the first launch brought to you?
Gosh, I think it was honestly around like I want to say 20, and it was 20 at around like a 29 a month price point. So in my head, like having this thing go from, oh gosh, this is going to be a fun little project to me, to, oh wow, I have around 600, 700 MRR, that felt like a massive amount of validation. And then I started to like really dive into the numbers, and I was like, okay, but I had another like 700 people register who aren't interested in paying. Like that conversion math from registration to activation to actual payment is terrible. Like, how do I improve that? And once you start kind of building out the funnel and you have enough traffic to understand where people are dropping off, then I think for me, the real fun begins of it's not the theoretical, what would people like, but it's what are people actually bouncing off of and what do I need to improve? How do I incentivize people to sign up and stay active and not just like register, put in a username, password, click around, and then never return?
Yeah, okay, sure. And that makes complete sense. But again, coming back to the fact that you're a solo founder and you've been the only one working button down for a while, you turned a designer, a marketer, a salesperson, all these roles were just you. What was the most difficult to learn?
Gosh, a lot of them were. It's hard to pick just one. I think the single hardest thing for me has been um, marketing after the first initial bits. Like one of the things that I found really, really effective in the early goings of Button Down was the fact that the marketing was almost solved in the sense of I could say, here's why I built it for these like very, very specific use cases. And I was really, really effective at targeting the niche of people who had the same like nitpicks and pain points and use cases as exactly myself. And that was like a really sizable niche that was great. And I was able to address that really quickly. And that felt very easy, very elegant because in my head, it wasn't really marketing. It was me just like ranting and raving about how I feel the way I feel. I think shifting from that towards more of an expansion standpoint of, okay, I have a really, really good handle on that niche. How do I expand to the outer universe of customers and users who might not say know what Markdown is or care about API access, but still want something very minimal, want integrations, want a bunch of things for which Buttondown is best suited, but I'm not like conversant with the, their specific use cases and their specific jargon. Being able to shift into marketer mode for them has been really, really tough, especially because I'm an engineer by trade and I spend so much time thinking about things through an engineer or developer's lens that taking off all of the preconceived notions and getting rid of the tunnel vision that I have has been really, really tricky, but also extremely rewarding.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I first visited Buttondown, I thought, okay, so that's again a website that to a marketer feels like it should not work. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's just like a lot of text, right? And you go there and you're
Yeah.
like, wait, all the things that I've learned in my career is like, do not give people sheets and sheets of text to read. But for you, kind of like works the other way around because honestly, I kind of got hooked because it's just like so clean. And I kept on reading and I went into documentation and like APIs. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't know nothing about APIs, but or like so I say. But anyway, it's not a thing that I would do myself. But it was just like still so clean and so well explained that I thought, okay, well maybe if I put enough effort, then I could still use it. So what tipped you off that this lawn reads are your thing, and how did people react? Like, how did you go against maybe all your marketing gut and against all the other marketers with this strategy?
Of course. And I'll preface this with a lot of my experience with Buttondown is grounded in the fact that Buttondown is not, to put it mildly, is not a novel product. Like, I'm not going from 0 to 1 of like the first ever email marketing SaaS. It's an extremely crowded space. And the advantage of that is what button down success criteria looks like is not establishing a new vertical. It's not like taking over the industry and being like the next MailChimp or whatever. It's really finding a small slice of customers within this very, very large $1 billion industry and building the best possible product for them. And to your point of like the splash page that shouldn't work, it actually kind of works in both senses, in the sense that I had done a lot of A/B testing and iteration and just experimenting of what sort of homepages or pillar pages worked in terms of conversion and keeping users. And one of the things that I found was that the more conventional marketing pages, sort of like you've got the hero image, you've got the H1, you've got the 3 features that have a screenshot and like a little bit of text, and then a CTA and a bunch of testimonials. Like that actually converted pretty well. And then all of the customers that converted from those specific pages like ended up bouncing off the product, because really button down is not the right product for them on the margins compared to some of the other tools. Like they ended up really looking for something that was closer to like a MailerLite or a MailChimp or something along those lines. The folks for whom the super prosaic, long-winded, here's a lot of text homepage, for those folks who converted, they're like really, really active. They never churn because that kind of copy and that kind of sell resonates with them. They're not interested in like whiz bang user interfaces or like super, super powerful, 10-page long automations or fake SVG graphics or anything. They just want like in plain text, here's what it does, here's what it doesn't do, here are the features, and being able to kind of choose their own adventure in terms of browsing the API documentation, like you said, or going from there. It did feel like a little, I guess, cognitive dissonance for lack of a better term. My fiance is a marketer, and as I was iterating on those pages with her, she was like, "Are you sure this is what you want to do? Like this copy is very, very plain spoken. It doesn't really sound like a SaaS." And I was like, "I know, but I think that's who's going to enjoy this and who's going to be a really, really good user are the folks who have already tried out all of the other platforms, seen that paradigm, and they want something different."
Yeah, no, I mean, about it doesn't sound like a SaaS. We just laughed about that in our Slack channel because we found this picture that would say, "What if B2B SaaS businesses sold burgers?" And the website would say something like, "The best way to fight your hunger," or "The best way to enjoy meat and cheese and the bun together." So yeah, it's
Yeah.
just yeah, we marketers, we love that. Yeah, and honestly, after like interviewing so many founders and seeing so many websites and products, I feel like, yeah, it's a very common problem for SaaS products to have people actually dig deeper to understand what the product does. So again, when I went to Buttondown, I was like, wow, that's simple. Like I can just, press the button and do a few things, and then here's your newsletter. But Buttondown, the name, I really wanted to talk about it because it's a fun name. But I would assume that it doesn't go easy with marketing and your SEO efforts.
Yeah, if you Google button down, you're gonna get Zara, you're gonna get J.Crew, you're gonna get Uniqlo. I think buttondown.email shows up maybe if I'm lucky towards the very, very bottom of the first page, possibly second page. Uh, there are very few technical or product level decisions in the early goings of a project that are truly like irreversible, that you really need to spend a lot of time thinking about. Like I chat with founders who are saying, "Oh, I'm really sweating how I should do pricing pre-launch, or I'm really thinking about how I should like structure this nav bar. Like all of those things are so trivial to change after the fact. Like you kind of just need to get over yourself and just ship the thing and iterate from there. The one thing I wish I had spent a little more cycles thinking about was the name itself, because it came from, as context, one of the flagship features for Buttondown when I was first launching it was Markdown support. Markdown's kind of a dialect that's a little more powerful than plain text, but a little less janky than a WYSIWYG editor or full-on HTML. And I was just sort of trying to think of some sort of riff on Markdown that sounded vaguely professional and elegant, but not too, like, again, too sassy. I didn't want it to be like markdownemails.io or anything along those lines. And I didn't think about it enough and just chose Buttondown because I saw buttondown.email was an available domain. And that has been a bit of an uphill battle in terms of the organic SEO, because the number of times I'll have folks write in and say, like, I really couldn't find you guys because I was just Googling or Binging or whatever, Buttondown, and was just finding shirts and shirts and shirts. That was unfortunate on my part. But despite that, the organic growth treadmill has gone well. It's just had to fight a bit more of an uphill battle than I really should have in retrospect.
Yeah, right. Have you ever thought about changing the name?
I have. It's one of those things where like the two big kind of investments in my head from a resource standpoint and an energy standpoint are like changing the name and doing a complete rebrand and trying to go for the .com of like buttondown.com is parked by someone right now who's asking, I think, like 750K, where it's like that's a little expensive for my taste.
A lot of
And
shirts you have
I
to you have to
yeah.
sell to kind of make up to this.
Yeah, it is kind of tempting in the sense of I've chatted with folks who have done that kind of like full scale rebrand before, and I think they would say, you know, there are some things that didn't go well, there are some things that went really well. Like overall, it was worth the effort. I think I'm still at the point where I feel like there are lower hanging pieces of fruit that I can do in terms of improving Buttondown as a product and improving some of the existing user acquisition. Which is not to say that I will never rebrand it or I'll never go for the .com or any of those things, because I think the world, you know, 2 years from now looks very different than the world of today. But right now, it's not high enough on my list where it's like I'm out of ideas. I think I need to go for the rebrand, because if it just gives me like a X% bump in SEO organic traffic, then it's worth it.
All right. No, it's a great name. I mean, I loved it when I saw it. It just, yeah, but then, I started Googling it and yeah, it was a bit of a stretch. But
Yeah.
then, okay.
The funniest is
So,
when you
yeah.
search button down alternatives, and it's just talking about like t-shirts and Henleys and polos, and it's like, well, that's not quite right, but I'll take it.
Not quite, no. All right. So, 1.5 years ago, you quit your day job, right? And you fully focused on button down. So, from there, did you grow the team? Did you get somebody to work with you? Because since, you were able to do that move, I would assume that it means more customers, more support, more development. So, how do you do it?
For sure. I think when I made the decision to work on Button Down full time, my first goal was honestly like less growing the business and accelerating that, and more honestly an existential one of, do I want like the life of being a bootstrap founder? Like, do I want to shift away from my big tech career, which I really liked and loved the people I worked with and felt like I was learning a lot, and move towards something that's completely different? So first, my goal was to validate that and make sure like I enjoyed the day to day, because the blessing of running a business like Buttondown or like many SaaSes is that if you want, like, you can kind of climb the hedonic treadmill of keeping on growing and like expanding the team and all of those things, or you can say, hey, the margins on this business are incredible, I'm just going to like sit on it or sell the business or cash out in some way and then spend my time gardening or doing something else or working on a new project. And so once it became obvious to me that I loved working on Buttondown full time, it was a great creative outlet, I did want to grow the business and grow the team, then the question was really, where do the resources need to be allocated? And for me, the two biggest things kind of dovetailed with where I felt like my time was not being spent enough and that the time was very valuable, which for me was writing, both on like the technical writing and the documentation side and the marketing side, and then really customer onboarding and customer success. Again, because Buttondown is in a very, very competitive industry and there are lots of alternatives, one of the things that really makes or breaks a lot of these accounts is how easy is it for me to go from clicking around on Buttondown to registering to boom, I have a custom domain and everything's set up and I'm ready to go. And being able to hire a technical writer and a engineer who would spend all of their time both in a white glove capacity and contributing to the core product to make that better, that's where it really felt like, okay, any additional cycles here is going to be super well spent. Like I don't have to worry about it because it's helping not just new users but the existing users as well. And sourcing was very tricky of like the even with all of the layoffs and all of the tumult in the industry over the past, 12 months, 18 months, it's still incredibly competitive to find folks who are really, really good at being able to context switch, not just from a technical and a non-technical standpoint, but from a, like what we were talking about with marketing, from a interior to an exterior standpoint of thinking about things as the writer, but also thinking of things as the reader. And so I really had to tap my personal network, which again is kind of unhelpful, unactionable advice, but it's true of like, who are the people I know who are really, really great writers who are looking for something to do maybe as a nights and weekends project, or they are freelancing and they have availability for a new client. And like, how do I find those folks as opposed to like just tossing something into the ether of, here's a job description, just like the 75,000 other job descriptions that you've probably seen. And how do I stand out? And hitting the personal network thus far has been really, really helpful for me.
Okay. And as far as I understand, you've got contractors working with you. It's not full time, right? But I would assume it's like a long term commitment. It's not like you go
Mhm.
to, I don't know, people per hour and hire a new person for each article. So, how do
Right,
you,
exactly.
yeah, how do you work around that? Because again, people are not really um, full time with you, right? They work on different projects. So, how do you make sure that you're able to translate the culture that you're trying to grow? Because as far as I see, you see yourself working on Button Down many years from now and maybe grow into a much bigger company. So, I would assume you're starting to build some kind of culture and values inside the team from this point. So, how do you keep everyone on the goal? How do you make sure that everyone understands their role and that and the fact that it's a small team, so everyone's kind of working on growth together. So, and yeah, basically, how does the communication happen?
Of course, a lot of the culture and value side of things happen during the sourcing and initial onboarding and negotiations. In the sense of, you know, if you're a talented engineer or if you're a talented writer, and what you want to do is kind of be, and I don't mean this in a negative way, like a mercenary of, I want to work on 10 different projects over the course of 10 different weeks and like bop around a bunch of different companies and industries, like that is completely valid. And also like Button Down is not going to be the right fit, to your exact point of really biasing towards longer term relationships. That way, the folks who are working on Button Down can build up a context and an understanding of the product. So a lot of those conversations were happening in the early goings of, here's the arrangement. Like you can work in a very asynchronous manner. You get a lot of ownership over the product and the direction and where you want to grow, whether it's as an engineer, or as a writer, or as a marketer. But it means like you're going to be focusing on this one thing. And within that one thing, you get a lot of ownership and latitude and agency. And that was both a really positive negative filter and a positive filter. There were a lot of folks who I respect a lot who are just like, this sounds like a great opportunity, but it's not for me. I kind of want to just dive into a couple different projects and like get my feet wet and get a lot of exposure as opposed to really committing to one thing. But I think being able to offer folks who work with me a true amount of growth that comes through ownership. I think you bluntly learn more when you're embedded in any sort of project or any sort of creative endeavor for a long time, as opposed to, well, here's the spec, here's 3 pages. Please submit a pull request by the end of July. Thanks, you'll invoice me at the end. Like, I think you can get a lot of object level understanding of a system that way. But most of the folks who work with me are trying to basically build something along the lines of Buttondown at some point. They're earlier in their career. They want to kind of launch their own businesses. They want to be able to really work in a high growth startup environment. And I feel like the value prop that I can offer them is that on training wheels. And for some folks, that really doesn't sound interesting or enticing, but the folks who do buy in a lot. And I think going back to sort of the brand voice or the pros of it all, like being able to tell someone, hey, you get to write in this style. You don't have to write as if you're doing a fridge owner's manual from 1997 or anything. You get to feel a level of expression that you might not in a similar role. I think that can be attractive. And again, the folks for whom that isn't attractive probably aren't going to be the right fit for your project.
Okay. All right. I think that's a great way to put it out there. Again, being very honest that, you could be a great professional, but we're not going to work together because it's not a good fit in the long run. All right. So it's great that we started to talk about ambitions, because one of the things that we discussed on some of the previous episodes was why people choose bootstrapping versus raising funds. And one of the things was ambition, like how fast or how high you want to jump, basically, right? So, and to you, I understand that you want to grow further. You see Buttondown being a big company, but you still chose bootstrapping, right? So how do those ambitions and the fact that you're a bootstrapping company work together? And what helps you stay focused on this sustainable growth?
For sure. I'm in the lucky position to have Buttondown be financially completely stable so that if no growth ever occurred for the indefinite future, I would be completely fine. Like, it's throwing off a lot of cash flow. Like, it has already succeeded, frankly, past my wildest ambitions. And at the end of the day, I'm an engineer at heart. The things that are most motivating to me are getting to build products and design experiences that I think are legitimately great and feel good, not because they like drive B2B revenue or because they're capturing market share, but because they're strong products that stand on the weight of their own engineering prowess. And to me, growth is not a end goal. Like, growth for growth's sake, if that was something that was interesting for me, then I probably would not have gone down a bootstrap route. I would have done something closer to the VC route of, like, you raise a round, you build some stuff that maybe doesn't have unit economics at that scale, but you hit all your KPIs, you raise another round, and you keep doing that until you hit some sort of terminal velocity. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just my personal goals and what excites me every day has nothing to do with that. Like, growth, I think of more as a byproduct that comes from building really strong products and figuring out a way to get those products in front of folks with whom it resonates. And you can do that with bootstrapping. You can kind of do that with alternative routes, but I think bootstrapping has this really nice blend of incentives in terms of where the finances are, where the goals are, such that I don't have to worry about, man, I could rush this thing out the door and it'd be kind of janky and my users might not like it, but like it'll be really, really good for the next round or things of that nature. Like, it's an entire class of problem that I don't have to worry about. I get the luxury of focusing on what's best for me and what's best for my users, and everything else kind of falls out of that.
Okay, so would you say that because at the beginning we were talking about the fact that as an indie hacker, you try to not perfect everything, but test and see how customers or users react. But now, since you've scaled a little bit, you can have the luxury of slowing down and focusing on what you think is the best for the product.
Exactly, exactly. And if I was saying that without any paying users, then I think there would probably be a bit of cognitive dissonance of, well, the price of not actually arriving at product market fit is you get all this agency to completely destroy entire features overnight, and it's completely fine if the direction changes. But also the weight of those decisions is nothing because there aren't folks who use them. Now that I'm in a position where if Buttondown like hides a button for 10 minutes on the core writing interface, like I know I'll get 100 tickets writing in that's like, where is the select tags for subscribers button? And having to be a little bit closer to where my career started out in terms of Amazon and Stripe, and those like really strong user first, more cautious principles has actually been a boon, because now it's not, oh, how do I have to think about testing strategies and uptime and all this stuff from whole cloth? I can lean back in on how really successful companies do that. And again, it's kind of a spectrum where complete YOLO and complete abandon is on one side, and then like Amazon's release strategy is on the other side of the spectrum. I've moved a little bit to the latter side, though I'm still not quite that far. It's more the value proposition and the risk of having a bad deploy or pushing broken code is so much higher than it was when I was first starting out. And the goal of a feature wasn't to be stable for 10 years. The goal of a feature was just to be used at all and to see if it resonates with users.
Yeah. Okay. Since you mentioned product market fit, I really want to talk about that because again, something that a lot of founders struggle with, and customer communication is key there, right? So obviously, you have to talk to your customers, but the actual question that everyone wants to ask is how to do that. You cannot knock on their doors and say, "Hey, I found you by your IP. So I know you live here and use my product. So tell me what went wrong and why you turned." All right. How do you do that? How do you reach out? What kind of incentives you offer for their help and for their insights?
Of course. And I'll preface this with a caveat that Buttondown's users are probably not completely generalizable to the entire universe of SaaS. Like Buttondown's users scale or skew rather a little more technical and a little more public facing, because if you're writing an email newsletter, like you're probably used to some back and forth. But I have the closest thing to like the one weird trick that has worked really well, which is whenever someone signs up and a couple days after they sign up, like I have a cron that from my box sends them an email that's coming from not a like marketing at buttondown.email or onboarding at buttondown.email, but it's just my email address in complete plain text that says like, hey, this is an automated email, but if you reply, like it is going to me. It's not going to some customer service agent. It's not going to like Help Scout or anything. It's going straight to me. Just want to understand like why you're checking out the product, like what you're interested in. Here's some of the stuff that we've worked on lately. Like the exact copy and prose that's in every single other like new user registration email that you get from a SaaS, but written again in very, very plain spoken English. Just want to hear more and really try to meet folks at their level, because I think we're pretty close to SaaS saturation, where people are not like super excited to try out a tool just because the way they were, say, a decade ago. People kind of have grown maybe a little cynical or a little world weary of the entire SaaS ecosystem. And just trying to err on the side of like, I'm not going to cold email you. I'm just going to like try and lay it out to you plain has been really, really effective. It worked when I was first launching Buttondown, when I didn't have an audience. Like that was in the pre-cron job days, where it was me just opening Gmail, copying and pasting a list of email addresses for folks who had signed up and sending this email to them. And I think like people really do respond to that in a way that feels more earnest and feels more genuine than every single other like onboarding SaaS sequence that they get. And you can take it too far. Like I'm sure you get inundated with like cold Twitter DMs and cold emails that are like, here are 3 random things I pulled from you from LinkedIn. I'm going to mail merge them in so it looks vaguely personalized, but I definitely sent this to like 1,000 other people. Like people just are smarter than that. Like they know that's happening. And I think trying to be honest with them and just get them into a conversation. Because as soon as you have some sort of a reply, you can schedule 15 minutes to chat with them. Then you start to get a lot of insights, especially for something like Buttondown, where it's not trying to establish an entirely new vertical. It's more, what do you hate about what you're currently using? And people are always excited to just rant and rave about
To
things that are bothering
complain.
them or things that frustrate them. Exactly. It's hard to put someone on the spot and be like, what's one thing that you really wish a tool existed for? Like, that's a really hard question to answer. But if you ask them, what's something that really annoys you about like MailChimp, or what's something that really annoys you about Cloveo, that's really easy for them to answer. And focusing on that side and kind of having the negative directions as opposed to positive directions, if that makes sense, that has been a very easy way to steer the conversation.
Oh wow, that's interesting. I started like realizing in my head like how many tools I can complain about. A few. But yeah, and it's great. I completely understand how people get excited when you can actually reply to the founder because I did that a few times for the podcast because I love the product and I thought, okay, I'm going to just email back, and it worked. But there were a few that didn't, and it was just an automated email and it went nowhere. And then I got a reply, it got lost, it never went to the sender. So I was like, what's the point of doing it at all? Just putting your face there, but not
Yeah.
actually communicating. So that's kind of frustrating. All right. Do you know what's the like reply rate? Like how many people do actually want to rant about other products and tell you what they're looking for in Buttondown?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it's way higher than I frankly expected. It's in the like 5 to 10% range for every single new registration, which means
Oh
like
wow.
I wake up and I'm now at the point where I can't uh, sit down and jump on a call with all of them, but the both it's a longest and most valuable part of my day at this point is waking up, coming into a new crop of like 10, 20, 30 emails that sort of like, and there are folks who will be just saying, hey, I'm just testing to see if this reply actually works, to your point. And then I'll get folks who come in and write 500 words of, here are all the tools that I've tried before. And I don't know if Buttondown's the right one for me because I tried this and I hated this and I tried this and I hated this and so on and so forth. But being able to have this constant river of both customer feedback and prospect feedback, especially for folks who end up not going with Buttondown, is incredibly useful. It's you hear often a lot about founders who post product market fit kind of get disconnected a little bit between the day to day of like user pain because they've hired customer service folks and they're not always the first line of support and all of these things, and all of that makes sense. But I think it's so important to start everything grounded in, okay, but what problems are people actually having and what can I do to either solve them or make it slightly less painful?
Yeah, I can completely understand. All right, perfect. Thank you for being so open about this. All right, just a couple more questions, and one is the usual. What's the biggest win and the biggest failure so far?
Who biggest win and biggest failure? Um, I think we probably covered the biggest failure in terms of choosing the name.
I mean,
I would
it turned
say,
out to be
yeah,
okay.
it definitely turned out to be okay. I think there maybe to generalize from that a little bit. So much of what I did in the first, let's say, 6 weeks of Buttondown was honestly not really considering that it would be a thing I'd be working on 6 years from now, let alone a decade from now. Some of those are like really trivial architectural decisions that took a really long time to unwind. Some of them, like we were talking about, were just branding decisions. And so the kind of meta failure there was not sufficiently striking the balance between, okay, let's just get this in front of some folks' hands and seeing what they like, what they don't like, and really doing the scrappy MVP. And how do I future proof this in a way that if I want to go forward with it, like it'll be easy and I won't have to regret a bunch of 2016 Justin's decisions. So I think my big failure was not quite adequately striking that balance and not giving a lot of those early decisions the thought they deserved. The biggest win, I think, going from this is just completely me, solo founder, no contractors, no one, to my first hire, which was the onboarding engineer who kind of helps with customer success, answers some tickets, improves the immediate user journey of the product. I had a lot of and this is really getting into psychoanalysis territory here, frankly. Like, I had a lot of self doubt of like, it felt like a big leap going from this is a solo founder sustainable business to, oh, there are more people involved now. Like, I had all of these completely incorrect misgivings of, oh, but this person won't have the right brand voice, they won't be thinking about customers the way I will, they won't know all of the things I do, they don't have this context. And just all of that was so wrong. Like, they hit the ground running, and immediately the impact was like, this is better for me because it preserves my focus on larger, more strategic initiatives. It's better for the customers because they get someone whose full job, their success criteria is making sure they have the best possible time. And I really knock myself for not doing it like 2 years sooner because it was so immediately great for everyone involved.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a very usual answer that makes me really happy. Like getting the right team or like getting the best people to work with me
Yeah.
was the best decision ever made. So that's perfect. All right, and you've already shared an amazing hack on like how to engage people in a conversation to give you some insights about the products that they didn't like and what they're looking for. But is there anything else, a hack that works for you that's maybe like with your copy, any marketer would be uh, kind of terrified about this decision, but it worked for you. Was there anything else that was not maybe completely conventional, right? But you implemented it for Buttondown and it works for you, and it's the hack that you go to every time you need, I don't know, to spice things up.
It's a great question. I think this isn't maybe a hack because this is fairly common advice, but I think it's easy to get out of the habit of it or lose the muscle memory for it, which is, I owe Button Down success to the fact that I could short circuit so many product decisions and marketing decisions and all of these things from the perspective of, if I'm the user, how would I react to this? How would I want this user flow to work? What would I want this marketing page to say, and so on and so forth. And when in doubt, whether it's how should I build out this feature, what is the flow like, or how should I frame this feature in a marketing page or in a documentation page, like, try really hard to throw all of the thoughts that you have in your head and all of the tunnel vision that you get from spending hours and hours working on a thing out the window and just approach it with completely virgin eyes of like, I've never seen this product before, I don't know any sort of context, like what would I expect to happen? And time again, the intuition and the findings you get from that experience always ends up to be the correct one. Like, I'm sure there are some apps or software businesses that their main goal is novelty of, we're going to build like this completely new paradigm, or we're going to invent, pull to refresh on iOS and things of that nature. And if you're that kind of person, great, maybe this doesn't apply to you. But I think the most delightful user experiences or marketing experiences come from something working exactly the way I expect it to. And being able to really tap into that feedback loop of, what do I think should happen here? What do I think this should say? And then implementing that and just going into that cycle always seems to work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like you can definitely reinvent the wheel if you want to and like do something extremely creative, but it should come on top of a product that works perfectly, a product that does the thing that it tells it does. And other than that, if you can add some value with the bells and whistles, sure, yeah. But first, yeah, it should just work for people. Okay, awesome. I think
Exactly.
that's a great advice. All right. Well, Justin, I think honestly, I feel like what I saw at Button Down and what I hear here during the episode, you translate the values and the like the vibe that the product gives completely. It's really great to see how a founder is such a great advocate for what they're doing and really translates the values that they're pushing with their product. So thank you.
Thank you. That's super flattering to hear, and I'm glad that conveys. I'm always sort of worried that it's way easier for me to like write this stuff down than to actually like live it in practice. And I'm glad a lot of where I think not necessarily the entire industry should be, but certainly parts of the industry should be in terms of a focus on craft and authenticity comes through.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for an amazing conversation. And I hope a couple of years from now, we do another episode when Buttondown rules it all.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. Take care.